afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar from Pantry to Plate, ensuring food access during the holiday season. My name is Chris Canty. I'm a Super Bowl champ with the New York Giants and current radio host for ESPN, and I'm honored to serve as your moderator for this important discussion. Now, as a proud member of the board of directors for the United Way of New York City, I've seen firsthand the incredible impact this organization has in bringing together partners and communities to address critical issues like food insecurity. The holiday season is a time of celebration and giving, but for many New Yorkers, it's also a time of immense need. For food insecurity continues to affect countless families across our city, and today we'll be hearing from leaders on the front lines of addressing this challenge. Together, these organizations are making a real difference in ensuring that no one in our community goes hungry during this critical time of year. Today, we are joined by Grace Bonilla, who is the CEO of the United Way of New York City, Leslie Gordon, CEO of the Food Bank for New York City, and Jilly Stephens, CEO of City Harvest in New York City. Before we begin, ladies, I would like to give each of you the opportunity to introduce yourselves and share a bit about your background and tell us about your organization's mission and the specific ways you're addressing food insecurity during the holiday season. Let's begin with Grace, then Leslie, then Jilly.
Thank you, Chris. It is such an honor to be with you and with these amazing women today, talking about what we're doing to meet the gap. Like you said, my name is Grace Bonilla, President and CEO of United Way of New York City, and I have been here for about 3 years. And this is an 86-year-old organization that has always met the need of New Yorkers in various ways. The way we do that today is through our health equity, our education equity, our justice and opportunity award. But what has always been a legacy program for us is definitely our food and benefits program. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, so for me, this is very personal. My family definitely benefit from pantries in our neighborhood, and even at the time, I didn't even realize how critical those were for our dinner table. So to be at the helm of an organization that is looking at the needs of New Yorkers is an incredible privilege. And I look forward to telling you a little bit more of how we do that at United Way in the food space.
That's great. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Leslie Gordon. It's such a delight to be here with you, Chris, Grace, and Jilly, who are such amazing colleagues, and glad to be in the company of all of our guests this afternoon. I have the honor and privilege of being the president and CEO of Food Bank for New York City. And I frequently tell people that fighting hunger isn't just my job, it's in my DNA. I carry on a longstanding family legacy. I'm actually the fourth generation, dating back to my great-grandfather in my family, of people who are dedicated to making sure people have enough to eat. So this work has always been a strong part of who I am. Over the past 2 decades, I've had the privilege of leading teams at our sister organization here in New York City, City Harvest, Feeding Westchester, and now at Food Bank for New York City, where I've proudly been since March 30th, 2020. That often elicits a lot of comedy and laughter for its timing. I'm deeply passionate about the fight against hunger and poverty, and I really believe that we can only tackle these issues if we work collaboratively together. And that's part of why I'm so excited to be here today and share insights with all of you. On Food Bank for New York City, we've proudly served the city for over 40 years, and we've been on a mission to empower every New Yorker to achieve food security for good. We make direct impact in the lives of New Yorkers via a very extensive on-the-ground neighborhood-based network. And of course, we're here for all New Yorkers, no matter who they are, where they come from working parents in multiple jobs to our kids, to our older adults, and our newly arrived New Yorkers, making sure that they have nutritious food and the basic essentials. So happy to be here with everybody.
Hello. Very good to be with everyone today. My name is Jilly Stephens. I'm the CEO of City Harvest. City Harvest is New York City's first and largest food rescue organization. This year, we'll rescue and deliver over 81 million pounds of food and deliver it free of charge to a network of over 400 soup kitchens and food pantries throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City. A food rescue organization is not only rescuing that great food, but it's also ensuring that that great food isn't going to waste at the same time. My background is in international development. I moved to New York City in 1996. I was working for a large international medical charity, and I'd spent several years working in developing countries where I really came face to face with people struggling with feeding themselves, their families, all sorts of significant issues. And was brought to New York City to run that program from the head office, and was shocked to get here and find out there was an issue of food insecurity right here in New York City, and in fact right here in the country. And so within months of working at that organization in New York City, I became a donor to City Harvest. And I would say that's where the love affair with City Harvest began, and that's really where I cut my teeth when it comes to work we have to do in New York City to make sure that every single one of our neighbors has access to good quality, nutritious food. As Leslie has said, and I know Grace will reiterate for all of us, we're better when we do this work together. And it's really been a privilege to work so closely, not only with Grace and Leslie, but for our staff to work together collaboratively as well. It's a very powerful thing. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
Bravo, Jilly. Collaboration is the key when tackling such a big issue that impacts everyone within our community. Thank you, Jilly, Leslie, and Grace, for those wonderful introductions. Now let's dive into today's discussion. We'll cover 3 key topics, and for each, we'll hear from one of you as the lead, with the others providing additional insights. Leslie, we'll start with you. The holiday season often brings increased demand for food assistance. Can you share some of the specific challenges that the Food Bank of New York City faces during this time, and how you work to meet the heightened need? Leslie, we can't hear you.
So Chris, Food Bank for New York City's network of soup kitchens and food pantries and higher education campus partners across the 5 boroughs report increased demand, right? We're seeing well more than 1.5 million New Yorkers who are food insecure across our great 5 boroughs. And hunger doesn't take a holiday. Food insecurity isn't just a holiday problem. We're working all year round to address this issue, to make sure, as you heard from my colleagues, that our neighbors have what they need to thrive, no matter what the time of year. We believe that food is far more than sustenance. It's a bridge to culture, particularly during the holiday period, family, dignity. And so that's, again, why we're dedicated to making sure that every single one of our neighbors have what they need to celebrate this season without sacrificing. You know, the statistics are startling. 50% of our New York City households can't afford the rising costs of food and rent in New York City. And so more and more of our good neighbors and New Yorkers are turning to organizations like all of ours to provide them with good fresh produce and protein and culturally relevant food items that they need to feed their families during the holidays, so that they can gather around the tables and celebrate as they wish.
Thank you, Leslie. Grace, Lily, I'd love to hear your perspectives on this as well.
Yeah,
How do
thanks,
these challenges show up in the work?
Absolutely. One of the things that I do have to give is credit to the sector. The 3 of us work with thousands of pantries and soup kitchens across the city of New York, but they're also an incredibly resilient network of folks who know that this is also a period where they can fundraise, they can get more funds in. And the beauty of how we work at United Way of New York City is that they can always turn back to the allocation that we've given them to buy food, but they get very savvy during this period. I agree with Leslie, and I think it needs to be underscored. Food insecurity is something that happens across the year. Definitely the holidays is an opportunity for us to highlight it. But my wish for my Christmas wish is that we can talk about this throughout the year so that we can meet the needs of all New Yorkers and really the root causes of food insecurity that are many times not food. It is the rising cost of rent and transportation and childcare that lead people to our pantries. But my hat's off to that network that really keeps our communities fed.
I think that's a really important point, Grace, and I think we probably can't do enough to underscore how much that network of pantries and soup kitchens really lead the way for us. And we have the opportunity and the privilege of helping get food to those organizations. You know, we know anecdotally that this is a time of year where people, or when people who have already strained budgets feel the strain a little bit more. And sure, hunger, food insecurity is a year-round problem. Recent research issued by Robin Hood Foundation and Columbia University showed that the majority of New Yorkers who are visiting that incredible network of food pantries and soup kitchens have jobs. Over 2/3 of those people. And so those visits to not just your neighborhood food pantry, for some families you're going out of your neighborhood to find the food that you need, those visits become sort of a financial management tool. You know, you can't not pay your rent, you can't not pay your utility bills. Childcare is incredibly expensive, rents continue to rise. New York is an incredibly expensive city. And so food is viewed as an elastic expense. And so rather than going to the grocery store, maybe 1 week, maybe it's 1 week a month. It's not every week for everybody who turns to that network. Rather than going to the store, you can turn to a food pantry. Those food pantries are on the front line doing incredible work, making sure our neighbors have the food that they need. And hunger and food insecurity is a year-round problem. This is an especially expensive time of year, though. And so that's where we see people really begin to feel the pinch and need a little extra support. And I'm grateful that we're all there along with that network to help make sure the food is there for them.
Absolutely. And when you think about spreading holiday cheer and giving and getting folks into the holiday spirit, one of the things that you want to make sure is that people that are working every single day to make ends meet have the opportunity to celebrate the season without having to sacrifice. It's just like you said, Leslie, it's a point well made. Grace, collaboration is key to tackling the challenge as big as food insecurity. Can you share how the United Way of New York City works with partners like the Food Bank and like City Harvest to address those issues during the holidays?
Absolutely. I mean, these two organizations have been critical to our success at United Way because we're constantly talking about what does the sector need, the network of providers, but we're also talking about much larger issues like SNAP benefits. We're advocating together. We're teaching others how to advocate for themselves together. And that alignment of constant conversation around the ebbs and flows of the sector, the ebbs and flows of the economic crisis that the city is facing, that is what makes us a lot stronger. One of the things that I'm very proud of is also how we support the network. We are out there in the front lines with our network providers, and we have to also acknowledge that they're not all built the same. We have huge providers that feed thousands of people every day. We also have small pantries that are only run by volunteers. And I think that for us, the value that we hold the closest is dignity. Regardless of whether you're going to a very large pantry or a very small pantry, we want you to feel that it's a dignified experience for every single New Yorker. And the way we do that is really by helping our pantries and our soup kitchens meet the demands of the moment and ensuring that they have the skills available to them to meet the demand. We want to make sure that our food is kept safe and that people can have trust that the food they're going to get is going to keep their family safe and fed. We want to make sure that their finances are good, that they're able to really be a staple in the community. And we want to make sure they know what to do with new foods that may be available to them. We've made a real effort to work with farmers that are closer to home so that we can also support the entire conveyor belt of what it means to get from farm to table, even in our pantry system. And sometimes you may get something that you're like, my community may not know what this is. Our nutritionists are there to make sure that every community feels empowered to take what is available to them, make delicious food for their community, and know that it's safe. And that happens because these three organizations are there on the front line to support the system.
Jilly, what does collaboration look like from your perspective at City Harvest, and how does it strengthen your organization's efforts?
I think, you know, we're going to hear this theme a lot. Collaboration is key. We're much better when we're working in lockstep together. I think let's acknowledge, though, collaboration is hard, right? We've been working on this for many years, from the sort of germ of an idea at the height of the pandemic that, hey, we would be serving New York City better if we were highly coordinated and collaborating. And that takes a commitment to the time. Grace, Leslie, and I meet regularly and frequently. I mentioned earlier that now happens among our teams. It's a commitment. It's a commitment of time, our resources, and to the future of New York City, and envisioning a city where all New Yorkers have access to the resources that they need. And it takes time because you have to build trust, right? And I can't think of a situation where I've worked so closely with the leaders of other organizations than this one right now. And I'm very excited, not only about what we've achieved so far, but what we can achieve. Grace touched on this already, but one of the first things we were able to do was have really coordinated advocacy. You know, several years ago, around this time of year, you would see each of the three organizations going out with their different messaging about what was important, and they were all important messages. The priorities we each gave to them were important. Now, the three organizations collaborate on what is the most important message for us to get out. No matter what time of year, what do we want to emphasize? And we go out with a shared message that we're all signed off on, and that we can all stand behind. And I think there's a lot of power in that, and that's exciting. And it's important to the success we can have in our work in the city.
Leslie, what are the challenges that you see it from the food bank's perspective in terms of strengthening those efforts to collaborate in order to tackle food insecurity in our community?
Yeah, I mean, just on the tails of what you've heard from my good colleagues, Grace and Jilly, this work needs to be really intentional. And so you've got to lay really important groundwork around trust. I often tell people that, you know, trust is built by the spoonful and lost by the gallon. And so it's a true honor and entirely humbling to spend the time that we do together, because after all, the need in this city and what we're trying to accomplish is bigger than any one of our organizations. I see it less as challenge, Chris, than very real and meaningful opportunities that we light. And I hope that the three of us, in a lot of ways, lead the way and act as an overall model for other organizations and other verticals and spaces to be able to do the same thing. It's the results in a lot of ways have been magical, and I can't wait to see what more we do together. Importantly, we're leveraging the fact that collectively our organizations have 40 plus years in the space. We employ about 500 employees. We've got amazingly talented experts in food safety, financial administration, program development, nutrition, local agriculture, compliance, logistics, warehousing, and advocacy. And alone, we're individualized powerhouses. Imagine what we can do together. And of course, we represent the voices of our networks. We take that responsibility and carry it with us every day very seriously. We're here to advocate for federal, state, local programs that really strengthen our communities. And so the sky is the limit, Chris.
Absolutely. Grace, we've got a question from our audience. Before we get to our third topic, I wanted to get this out there. What are the messages of hope that your organizations can give to us when the call, the demand for food is so great?
So I have also worked in government where a lot of these decisions are made and where people have to kind of sometimes live with the decisions of funding and policies. And being on this side of the work, the biggest hope that I have is the resilience of our people. The fact that we're going to show up no matter what is going on. But we don't only show up for the emergency. We don't only show up to make sure that you can eat tomorrow. The advocates that we work with, the nonprofits that we work with across not just the food space, but many spaces are really fighting hard to make sure that equity and economic mobility are part of the narrative of every New Yorker, that regardless of zip code, you have an opportunity to succeed in this city because of how much our neighbors give to this city. So that's what gives me hope. That at the end of the day, we are going to stick together to make sure that every child, every senior, every family has an opportunity to have their best chance in a city that we all love.
Absolutely, Grace. My former coach, Tom Coughlin, used to always say, people won't listen to what you have to say until they know you care. And the way they know you care is by continuing to be there. That level of consistency matters in terms of being able to rely on the work that you all do in the space of food insecurity. Jilly, food access barriers are a persistent issue in our city. City Harvest's food rescue model is an innovative approach to this problem. Can you talk a little bit about how this model works and how it's helping communities during the holiday season?
Yeah, definitely. So Food Rescue's City Harvest was founded in 1982 with that model of food rescue, and very quick history. The founding CEO, I guess at the height of the potato skin craze, which I've heard about in New York City, was in a restaurant with friends and noted that, you know, while they enjoyed the potato skins, what was happening to the flesh of the potato? And she asked the waiter, she heard that the flesh of the potato was thrown out, and she asked if she could come and collect that the next day. And so that's really how City Harvest and Food Rescue was born. She took those potatoes to a soup kitchen, they thickened the soup, she gathered volunteers, and they continued gathering and collecting perfectly good food that would otherwise go to waste. 40 years on, the model is essentially the same. We're collecting great food that would otherwise go to waste. This year, over 70% of the 81 plus million pounds that we'll distribute will be fresh fruits and vegetables. It's all donated. The only food that we buy are turkeys for Thanksgiving because it's very hard to get those donated. And the quality is fantastic. That food is being donated to us maybe because it's being the let's say apples are too small or too big. We have some very large cabbages in the warehouse right now, for example. They're donated to us because they're probably too big to sell in the store. We're grateful for that. It's still very good food. And I often think, I realize that as I walk around the warehouse, if there's a lot of something, fairly recently, we had a lot of red grapes donated. You'll usually find in the supermarket, those same red grapes are on sale. It means there's too much in the market. And so they're being donated because there's a benefit to the broker or the farmer to donate them to us. So very good, high quality food. The other benefit of that is, you know, by preventing that 81 plus million pounds of food from going to waste this year and getting it onto the tables of our neighbors in New York City, City Harvest will also prevent the equivalent of more than 24 million kilograms of carbon dioxide entering into the atmosphere. And so that's something we probably don't talk about enough. We always like to emphasize the food and how great it is. But there's that added benefit too. But the food is fantastic. And that's a food rescue model, great food that would otherwise go to waste, usually perishable, fresh fruits and vegetables, and as much protein as we can get.
Grace, you mentioned earlier in our discussion about the infrastructure of the United Way and the huge distribution centers to the smaller food pantries. From a logistics standpoint, how does the United Way work with its food partners in New York City in order to navigate the challenges around logistics and make sure that the food is getting to the destination?
So I think that the beauty of the way the three of us work is that it is very different. It gives the network a lot of choice. At United Way of New York City, we work with one master food provider. We provide credit to each of our pantries so they can choose the food that is the most beneficial to their communities. We definitely believe in choice and believe that those pantries are going to know what their neighbors are going to eat before we know what they're going to eat. So those credits give them that flexibility of, like Jilly said, if she's providing those grapes and that cabbage because that's what she's getting this week, they can get other produce from us so that they can have a complement of what's needed in that particular neighborhood. And then it's delivered to them directly from the provider. So we don't have a warehouse model. We have a model in which our pantries can choose what they want.
Absolutely. Leslie, what strategies are you using at the food bank to help communities navigate barriers to food access?
Sure, Chris. So at Food Bank for New York City, we sort of think of it as Food Plus. So in our case, Food Plus benefits. So folks might be familiar with SNAP, what's called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly called food stamps years ago. And so interestingly, about 2 million, give or take, New York City residents rely on SNAP to put food on the table. This gives them the ability at will, within their own time frames and schedules, in a very dignified fashion, to go and select what makes sense for them, their households, their families. Of course, when SNAP benefits fall short or run out, our neighbors often turn to our collective pantries and soup kitchens and the food assistance network to make up the difference. So we've got a duality of focus at Food Bank for New York City. We help thousands of New Yorkers navigate what can feel like a very onerous, cumbersome SNAP application process, ensuring that people who are eligible are able to access this very critical lifeline. We address barriers like language and technology and some misinformation, empowering families to secure increasingly consistent and very long-term food support to make that happen.
Awesome, awesome. I'm curious because you mentioned SNAP and Grace, you also talked about this a little bit earlier in our discussion about policy, social policy, coordinating with New York City, and how evaluating the policy is very fluid in that regard. And how do you actually look at the policies that are in place and try to make everyone aware of the resources that are available to them within your organization, but also within the communities that you're trying to serve?
I love that question, Chris. So I'll give you a perfect example. The Farm Bill is the entity with which the federal government ensures that both farmers and folks that are food insecure are getting the resources that they need. It comes up for reauthorization every 5 years. And these three organizations have spent the better part of last year advocating to ensure that the Farm Bill is actually meeting the needs that we know are necessary today. So keeping up with what's happening at the federal level, how the state is responding to those changes, and then the impact on the local level is a critical part of our work. To give you an example, we've been advocating for a long time that's in the world of SNAP benefits, college students should not have to meet the work requirement as one of the areas where we think SNAP could improve. We believe that students should focus on school. It's the best option for them for economic upward mobility and ensuring that they're not going to need SNAP in the future. So why not allow our students to finish school without having to worry about a work requirement on top of school while receiving SNAP benefits? That's just one example where we're keeping track of what is happening at the federal level, what is the response that the state could have, and what's the response at the local level. And then ensuring that our pantries understand who's on their line, right? If there is a policy that was put in place that increases the number of seniors, the number of working New Yorkers, the number of students, it's important for them to understand the root causes of those that are on the line so they can advocate on their behalf.
And to that end, I'm curious to know from all of you, I want to open this question up to the group. What is the role that your respective organization plays in nutrition education for the individuals that frequent the pantries that rely on your services to being able to provide access to food?
I can jump in. You know, it's been a critical part of the programming at City Harvest for many years. Way back around 2004, I think, the Department of Health in the city started to publish really great statistics, not great statistics, but informative statistics about the levels of diet-related disease in New York City. And far from great, they were staggering. And we realized that in the very same neighborhoods where we were delivering food to our neighbors, these are the same neighborhoods where we're starting to see very high rates of diet-related disease. And while we were already bringing a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, and we were already doing nutrition education, it really gave us a strategic opportunity to just double down on all of that. And that nutrition education, which can come in many different forms, from a 6 to 8 week long course that you attend once a week to sort of little nutrition, digestible nutrition education pieces that might happen at a food distribution, perhaps at one of our mobile markets. They all can have an effect and really help people think differently about how they're eating. I remember many years ago at a mobile market distribution I was talking to a father who was there with his children. We were giving away kale, I think, many years ago, before it became quite as popular as it is now. And we had a nutritionist there and a cook cooking with the kale, handing out the recipe, which had been translated into the right language for that community. And this dad was completely blown away as he watched his son go up 2 or 3 times to get this dish that had been made and eat it. He couldn't believe his son was eating that kale. And that's important because fresh produce is expensive. We find it's among the first thing that's cut from a food budget. And it's a risk. You know, that dad probably wasn't going to walk into his store and buy kale. He doesn't know what it tastes like. He doesn't know if his kids are going to like it. But now he sees his boys like it. They can take a recipe home. They can take the kale home and prepare it at home and begin maybe to think differently about what they can incorporate into the diet. So many different ways. I know all of us can give examples of why that nutrition education is critical. It's a very important part of the work.
Thank you, Jilly. Leslie, this question is for you. I know during the pandemic, your organization had to nearly double its output in terms of pounds of food provided to the neighborhood. I want to say it went from around 80 million pounds of food to over 150 million pounds of food. And I'm curious to know, what have you seen in terms of the demand? Has it continued to stay at that level? And what has happened in terms of how that mobilization has affected your organization, and what you are now capable of being able to do in terms of providing resources for those in need in the food security space?
Sure. So, Chris, the good news is that organizations like ours, and of course our own at Food Bank for New York City, are made for moments like this. And so we deployed and organized resources immediately upon the close of New York City in February, March of 2020. Indeed, we grew from actually a little over 60 million to a little over 150 million in a really short period of time. We couldn't do that without a very well-oiled back-end operations machine of refrigerated trucks, talented drivers, a good sensibility about where the need was the greatest, really strong relationships with partners on the ground. And I can't overstate the importance of collaboration again. It was in the height of the pandemic, in the earliest moments of the pandemic, where, you know, as an example, Jilly and I were on the phone to each other, and our teams were talking about where resources were needed most and opportunities for us to work together for even greater impact. So happy to say we're made for moments like this. It's helped us, certainly and very unfortunately, but opportunistically, think about how we're poised to be able to respond not only individually as our own organization, but collectively in the future as other crises occur in our great city. And so it was an unfortunate time, but has yielded and positioned us, I think, to work better together in the future to respond to crises as they arise.
Grace, as it pertains to food security and being able to provide for those in need in our community, what are some of the lessons that the United Way of New York City learned throughout the pandemic and now that we're on the other side of that crisis?
I mean, the biggest thing that we learned is how to stay adaptive and flexible to meet the need. We are obviously here to support our pantries. One of the many ways that we support them is we have these monthly webinars to really talk about nutrition, for example. But when we saw that the entire city shut down, and that kids usually get their food from school and they weren't going to go to school, we knew that we needed to do something different. And because of the various partners that we have, not just in the food space, but in other spaces, in churches, in the school system, we were able to really shift. So one of the things that we learned is that parents, there are many families that do not have the opportunity to come to a pantry. As we have said, many of the folks that are on our lines are working New Yorkers, and some of them have 2 or 3 jobs. So we are really trying to stay innovative and ahead of the curve by saying, what would it look like to do food distribution at the very schools where we do our education work? So in Mott Haven, we have a model that we've been able to keep since the pandemic, where we are distributing boxes of food to kids so we know that they're eating on the weekends. It's a great way to get our students to school because parents are depending on those boxes. And I think innovative ideas like that, where we are reaching parents and younger students where they are and not having them come to a line, is one of the things that has definitely survived COVID. But also this platform, right? We discovered that we actually don't have to be in person to meet the needs of the end user, the people that we serve, but also our pantries. The number of things that we've been able to move virtually has been amazing, and that is something that definitely has lasted, including the nutrition education that our team does every month with our pantries.
Thank you, Grace. Jilly, this question is from our audience, and Sharon Simmons wants to know, is City Harvest accepting new pantry memberships? And if so, how can they be in touch? If not, how can those organizations support?
City Harvest has about 400 pantries that we currently have signed up. I know that the team here will want to hear from anybody who's looking for food resources, and probably the best way of getting in touch is through United Way. Grace, I don't know if that's the right way for people to get in touch, or you can get me, Jilly, at cityharvest.org. Just email me is the easiest way, and I'll put you in touch with the right people to see what's possible. But we definitely want to know where people need help.
Absolutely. Leslie, this is for you. How can we get the addresses to the food pantry so they can share the information to families who may not have access to the pantries, may not be aware of them?
Sure. So at Food Bank for New York City, we have a find food functionality on our website at foodbanknyc.org. And so happy to have you visit and navigate through that. It's fairly granular, so you're able to navigate by your own home zip code in your neighborhood, or what you call your neighborhood. And if that's just, not your style and you'd rather talk to a human being, you can reach out to us at Food Bank for New York City. You can email me at lgordon@foodbanknyc.org to learn more, and I'm happy to put you in touch with a real person who can help you have a one-on-one experience to navigate to a location that feels right for you.
Okay, and now that we're into the Q&A portion of today's webinar, I just want to continue with some of the questions for our audience. And Grace, this one is for you. How does the United Way prioritize which communities, which neighborhoods to focus on during the holiday season?
That's a great question. We are constantly looking at not just what our food pantries are telling us they need, but what others are telling us. Like I said, we're very much in the health space, education space, and in the justice and opportunity space. And that means that we have 700 nonprofits at any given time letting us know what is going on in their particular neighborhood. And those are the qualitative stories that we look at. We're also looking at the quantitative work. We also run a program through our larger network where we get unemployment numbers all the time, and we know which neighborhoods are going to be impacted the most, which also leads to, okay, what do we think we're going to have to do for a particular neighborhood if we're seeing those numbers go up? Again, it's collaboration. It's really having that transparency with our partners in all 4 of our pillars. So they're letting us know who they need us to show up. And it's frankly the way United Way of New York City was able to respond even to the migrant crisis, understanding what neighborhoods a lot of our arriving New Yorkers were coming into and how we can help. So it is that constant communication loop with the network of 700 providers that we have.
Okay, thank you. Jilly, here's a question from our audience. How do you engage local businesses and restaurants to help with food rescue and redistribution, especially during the holidays?
Well, we've talked a lot today about how the need is really high. I think the good news is that the desire to help in New York City is also very high. And we've heard some good examples of that today. And I will emphasize, we're seeing this year round, but I'll highlight some of the things we're seeing, particularly around the holidays. City Harvest, as I've already touched on, was born out of a volunteer initiative. We still depend on volunteers today, and we have a fairly new food rescue center in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. We weren't sure after the pandemic that corporate volunteers were going to come back because after the pandemic, we were now in a new building where they're going to travel all the way out to Sunset Park, Brooklyn. The really great news is they do, and they come in their droves, and we're incredibly grateful to all the corporations and the corporate volunteers who come and make our work possible. Just to highlight, if there are any cynics among us, I've heard some corporate executives say, well, you don't really need us to come and repack this food. You do it because we give you a donation. In the pandemic, when those corporate volunteer teams couldn't come out, we hired 30 repackers. We turned to the restaurant industry, who had just laid a lot of staff off, to do that recruitment. And so I think for me, that's always the most visible way of highlighting how much we do depend on that volunteer support today, because when it went away, we had to hire a lot of people to replace it. So we're very grateful to those corporate volunteers and also the individual volunteers who come out every day to help repack food into packages that we can then deliver to the food pantries across the city. For many years, City Harvest, probably for going on 35, 40 years, City Harvest has partnered with the Daily News to run the Daily News Food Drive. New Yorkers can get involved beyond volunteering by supporting a food drive like that, participating. FDNY and NYPD houses will accept that food as long as it's shelf stable. So, you know, many ways for people to get involved. There are always ways for people to support beyond the financial donation, which charities like us will always talk about, but come and volunteer, help with a food drive. We try and make that volunteering as easy as possible. And this is a time of year when people really like to come out and give back to the community in that way.
Absolutely. It's an incredible time. People are always so generous. It's a matter of importance to be able to galvanize folks and to get them to be a part of this coordinated effort to make sure that everybody in our community that needs food has food. Leslie, you mentioned the SNAP benefits earlier in our talk, and I'm curious how you see your organization playing a bigger role in us advocating for greater access to those resources throughout our community.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the most important things that we can do at Food Bank for New York City is to engage our community members, help to elevate their voices. After all, they're the ones that own the stories, and so they can, in a lot of cases, speak well about what it means to be able to secure SNAP, what it means for themselves as parents potentially, for their kids. And so making sure that we're consistently and very intentionally lifting up and elevating the voices of the people who we serve and that are the beneficiaries of SNAP is really important. And then, of course, as you've heard a lot from my colleagues today, making sure that we're connecting consistently with folks who are the decision makers at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level, and really doing some honest storytelling. So, for example, $23 if you're a senior, an older adult, doesn't really go very far. Food's very expensive for those who are the grocery store shoppers in your household. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And so imagine being able to figure out how to make a meal, feed yourself or feed your household on $23. It doesn't go very far. So advocating for things like a minimum level of SNAP at the city, state, and federal level is certainly a priority of ours, among some other things when we talk about SNAP.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as we are nearing time, I do want to give each one of you, our panel, each member, an opportunity to give closing remarks as we wrap our discussion today. So, Grace, we'll start with you, then Leslie, then Jilly.
Well, Chris, I want to start by thanking you. You definitely are pulling double duty here as a board member and now as this incredible host for this conversation. And I want to thank everybody who joined. Food insecurity is a growing problem in our city. We have seen an 86% increase of visits to our pantries in the past few years. It's a problem that unfortunately is not going to go away anytime soon, and it requires all of us to fix it. But I also think about the folks that provide our food. We have a lot of local farmers who are also struggling to get the food to where it needs to go because they don't have the resources that larger farms have. And I think that's one of the things that I've loved about United Way and working here and the incredible team that we have is that we get to look at the entire system and places where we can make each part of the system better. So my message to all of you is I hope you enjoy the holidays with your families. Please don't forget your neighbors. They may not have the same amount of nutritious, delicious food at their table for their holidays without your help.
Leslie?
This has just been such a wonderful occasion. Many thanks to those who took time out of what I imagine are your busy schedules to participate today. Learning is a journey. And so if your journey is starting here with all of us today, I encourage you to continue to learn about food insecurity through any one of our organizations and to find yourself in our mission at Food Bank for New York City. Certainly visit us at foodbanknyc.org. There's lots of wonderful ways to participate. Once a year, twice a year, no matter how old you are, there's lots of wonderful ways to participate. And as Grace said, a very happy holidays to everyone who's here. This is a particularly wonderful time of year to volunteer. And so if you haven't gotten out there already, please don't hesitate to contact any one of our organizations.
Thank you. And I'll add my thanks to everybody who's taken the time to be here today and to extend very heartfelt, good holiday wishes to you all. Thank you for your interest in the work that we're doing. Thank you for your interest in learning more about how together we can address food insecurity in New York City. It really does take all of us, whether you're working at an organization like ours or a food pantry in the city, whether you're advocating, you're volunteering, you're donating your time or your money, if you're working at a corporation, it just takes all of us, restaurant chefs, everybody looks for a way to figure out how can we make sure our neighbors have enough food on their tables. I think it's that essential. And I think let's also collectively dream and look forward to a time when we don't have to be working towards that end. It's really still as unimaginable to me today as it was in 1996 that there's this issue of food insecurity in New York City.
Well said, Jilly. Well said. And well done to each one of you. Thank you to our panelists, Grace and Leslie and Jilly, for sharing your insights on this critical work that you're doing to ensure that all New Yorkers have access to food during the holiday season. And thank you to our audience for joining us in your thoughtful questions. As you've heard today, there are many ways to make an impact, whether it's volunteering, donating, or simply spreading the word about the incredible work these organizations are doing. We'll be sending out follow-up resources, including a recording of today's discussion, ways to get involved, and links to support the United Way of New York City, the Food Bank of New York City, and City Harvest. On behalf of United Way of New York City, thank you again for joining our webinar from Pantry to Plate, ensuring food access during the holiday season. And we wish you all a wonderful holiday season. Thank you.